Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a great conference. Sounds like you've been having a lot of fun. Just to get a little bit of, well, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a speech-language pathologist, and I'm based at the University of Central Florida, where I am a clinical instructor, but I am also the Assistant Regional Coordinator of what's called the FAST Center, which is the Florida Alliance for Assistive Services and Technology. So my specialty area would be using assistive technology for communication. I have over 30 years working with children with disabilities and their families. I spent 20 of those in Ireland, where I worked in a specialist service for children with disabilities. And I've been back in the U.S., based at the University of Central Florida for the last 2 years. I just wanted to get a little bit of an idea from you all. Are there any children here or adults, anybody that does use assistive technology to communicate? Okay, and what do you use? Pro Quo Go? The accent? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Today I'm going to focus mainly on iPads, but I did bring a couple of dedicated devices, and I'll touch briefly on how, if that's an option, what some of the avenues to go for that are as well. I also have, if you wouldn't mind, just a sign-in sheet for FAST, as I say, and I'll tell you a little bit about FAST. If you wouldn't mind just signing up there, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'm going to tell you today just briefly about a quickly overview of FAST, what FAST is. And the reason I'm going through that is because we are the Tech Act program for Florida, but many of you come from outside of Florida. Am I correct? Okay. Every state has a Tech Act program. So it's a resource that's available to you. So I just want to touch briefly on that and what the availability is there. Then I'm just going to talk about a little bit of an overview of assistive technology and augmentative and alternative communication. And then I'm going to talk about why an iPad, why it may be advantageous to use an iPad for communication. As I said, I'll touch a little bit on the dedicated devices. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to go through some apps then. And I'm going to go through a number of communication apps and talk about some of the places where you can get started, and then, moving forward with that. I'll talk about some technical tips when you're using these apps so that your child isn't in a communication app and all of a sudden has swiped out into something else or has turned on YouTube videos or whatever else might be there. And I'm also going to give you some resources where you can get further information yourself, and also just to so that if you want to do further research and you're making decisions and you want to make some comparisons, some resources where you can go in order to do that. Okay. FAST we're basically a nonprofit organization, and we're funded by the U.S. Department of Education and the RSA, the Rehab Services Administration, and this is through the Tech Act of 2004. And as I said, every state in the U.S. has a Tech Act program, and the mission being to improve the quality of life for all individuals. I'm saying this is Floridians because I'm in Florida, but whatever state you're in, through advocacy and awareness activities that both increase the access to and the acquisition of assistive services and technology. And the core work here in Florida is done through regional. You can see the regional centers, how Florida is kind of carved up. I'm in that purpley one over on the Atlantic coast, but we have different regional centers. Your state may only have one. Most of the states have one Tech Act program. But what they do is, as I said, there are loan programs, they provide information referral, they do assessment, training, they have a resource library, and there's also alternative financing. If someone maybe doesn't have the funds for purchasing an iPad, there might be an alternative financing program as well. But your Tech Act program, there may just be one. So what they usually do is they ship devices if you're trialing things to you for trials and demonstrations and such if they're very far away from you. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because I know you really want to know the nitty-gritty about communication and using assistive technology. We're the Atlantic region demonstration in Orlando, and we have regional centers all over the state, as I said. What is assistive technology? It's actually any item or piece of equipment, product, system. It can be acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, customized, but basically the point is that it's used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities. And interestingly enough, a lot of the technology that you and I and everybody uses now, you think of the predictive text on your iPhones and iPads, that all originated with assistive technology that was developed for people with disabilities. And I've been working with assistive technology for over 20 years, back in the days when we had these big, heavy communication devices, and it was something so very, very special. And I find this really, really exciting because I see the technology for everybody else, and the technology for people with disabilities has now merged and come together. And I think that's wonderful because it means, you know, we're all part of one community. And I think it's a great thing. And it also makes it a lot more it's not so cost prohibitive. Assistive technology can be used by anybody with physical, learning disabilities, cognitive, sensory impairments, communication impairments. Anybody can use it. And this is my favorite quote. For people without disabilities, technology makes things easier. But for people with disabilities, it makes things possible. And I think it's actually really, really exciting when we see what we can make available to and the access to, in my case, communication, learning, you know, even environmental controls by providing access to assistive technology. And I'm just going to throw it out a little bit because I want to talk a little bit about communication. And this is just laying the groundwork for using apps and assistive technology for communication. Tell me a little bit, and just throw out, how do you all communicate today? Talking, yeah. What else? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Texting, yeah. Lots and lots of different ways that you communicate. And for what reasons? Why do you communicate? Shout it out. Express our needs, human touch, yeah. Tell people what you want. Okay. We use it we ask people questions, we share information, maybe about something we see, or maybe something we're going to do that's exciting over the weekend, maybe our trip to Disney, or when you go home, you may be talking about all the things that you did here. We communicate for lots of different reasons, not just, you know, expressing wants and needs is very important, but we're also sharing that information and for that social closeness and those social greetings or rituals that we have, you know, might be simple as hi and bye or waving, whatever it might be. I lived in Ireland for 20 years. I got used to when I met someone first, you talked about the weather. The weather was so bad. That was a social ritual for Ireland. And we have social rituals, you know, here. When, you know, we meet someone, we might say, hello, how are you? And, you know, we leave, goodbye, see you later. So, as you discussed, these are all the ways we use communication to express our needs and wants, to exchange information. As you mentioned, that social closeness, to develop those personal relationships. And it may be through your body language or through your gesture. It may be through your words, you know, maybe something more obvious like saying, I love you, or it may be even something like, you know, you make a little joke or something along those lines. All those things that help bring us closer to the people that we care for. And then, as I mentioned, the social etiquette, you know, where there's those conforms of politeness, please and thank you, and your greetings and your closings and all that. And as we said, there's lots of different forms. It can be face-to-face, your interaction, all your gestures, sign language, written communication. Telecommunication has gotten so big, you know, between texting and Skyping and all that. But someone who's using AAC, they need to be able to realize any of these reasons for communication, as well as all these means of communication. So when we're looking at an AAC system, we want to try to make sure that it's a system that will allow as much participation as possible for the person using that system, so that, again, we help to close that gap in terms of the means of communicating and the reasons for communicating. And it's all, you know, as you mentioned, it's all the things we use, whether they be symbols, it could be paper-based symbols, or symbols in sign language, any strategies or techniques that are used to help to communicate with other people. And we incorporate everything, whether it be natural speech, just vocal approximations. Your children may have certain vocalizations that maybe don't quite sound like a word, but you know exactly what they mean. Any low-tech strategies, and then the high-tech strategies, which I'm going to talk about today. But what I want to highlight is when we talk about these high-tech systems, we don't forget about everything else. We have to think about all the different means of communication. We have to think about those facial expressions, those vocalizations, any word approximations that your child might have, any signs that they may use. We look at all modalities of communication. And it's used to enhance, supplement, or replace speech. And who's a candidate? Really, anyone who's not meeting all their communication needs through natural speech. So the people that we look at providing augmentative and alternative communication services or maybe someone who maybe they don't have access to natural speech, whether through oral motor difficulties, or they may have significant language difficulties. Sometimes we find someone who maybe isn't able to produce speech orally, but the extra cues that they get from assistive technology, seeing those words represented, seeing pictures, hearing it said out loud when they select a button on a screen, that actually aids the learning of language. We provide AAC for someone, as I say, maybe it's not someone who's going to be a long-term augmentative communication user, but someone that maybe is at risk for development. And right now, their speech isn't meeting all their communication needs. It might be someone that, where speech might be okay with some people, but maybe it's not clear or comprehensible enough for maybe people outside the home. They might need it in some situations and not others. And maybe it might be a temporary situation as well. Maybe someone's in the hospital and they've, had a ventilator or been very ill, whatever the situation might be. And one of the other things I wanted to highlight is that AAC can actually help children with developmental disabilities develop their communication skills. And the research backs this up, that augmentative and alternative communication, it actually facilitates the development of speech and the development of language. We do not see it becoming a crutch for someone to use for communication if they have aided communication. What we see is that it actually enhances their skills. And for someone who's going to communicate verbally, they will communicate verbally if they're able to. But very often, and I've seen with working with individuals with developmental disabilities, with a range of different syndromes and conditions, that even up through adulthood, we can effect that change and help to promote speech and language development by introducing aided communication. And initially, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this today because we're talking about getting started, we may use it for a basic means of communication. And, initially we might really focus on those wants and needs because that's what's going to be most motivating for the person that we're providing the support for. But we need to remember that communication is more than just asking for what you want. It might be, when mommy walks in the room, that the child says mommy, just to comment, oh, there's mommy, as opposed to just asking for a drink or something to eat or something of that nature. We want to improve functional communication across different environments. So it's not just, oh, we're just going to use it during mealtime, but we want to think about all day long. How can we help that child communicate? We want to alleviate the frustration. When someone has maybe greater understanding, then they're able to get out and produce in terms of their language. It can be very frustrating at times. And that's where we look at kind of equalizing comprehension, the understanding of language, and what someone is able to produce expressively. And as I mentioned before, we want to promote language development, facilitate speech development. Are there any adults here other than parents? Okay. Well, for adults who may have disabilities, sometimes by introducing aided communication, it provides that means where maybe there might be some vocational opportunities, because we can set up things very specifically in terms of communication for that work environment, and it makes things easier. Ultimately, our aim is to increase participation in all walks of life. And sometimes, too, we find by introducing aided communication that we actually reduce challenging behavior. That frustration is down, and that if there's any challenging behavior, that can be reduced as well. So I want to talk about a little bit, before we get into the systems, just about vocabulary. Because initially, when children learn language, it's not just the nouns. Initially, when children learn language, there's a lot of high-frequency predictable words that are called core vocabulary. And actually, when you look at you and I, about 250 to 400 words make up 80% of what we say. And this is a variety of parts of speech. And then the fringe vocabulary that I'm going to talk about are things like the nouns and the names and the places and the more personalized type of vocabulary. So when we're looking at developing a system, we try to incorporate both these types of words so that we can help language development. And when you think about what would be the initial vocabulary of a toddler, if you look at those words over there, you probably wouldn't have thought that some of those would be the most commonly used words. But there was some research done by Banerjee in a preschool classroom, or toddler classroom, and these were the most common words used, 96% of the time. And these are what we call the core words. So, and the reason I'm highlighting is, if we want to build language, we do more than just have a bunch of nouns on a screen that children can use only in that particular situation, but we also teach other kinds of words, like no and yes and more and go and stop and that and here, all done. Those kinds of words that can be used in lots of different situations. I've seen children come in with communication aids set up. They come into my clinic, and I can see, oh, yeah, great, they have lots and lots of food, and then lots of activities for this particular setting in the classroom. And it's full of nouns, but they don't have the vocabulary maybe to tell someone that, they want that, or they want something different other than what's there. So sometimes if you have those generic types of words, it helps. And these are all the different types of core words, your verbs, adjectives, prepositions, pronouns, all those kinds of things. And that's just a conversation example, typical for an adult, and out of those 22 words, 21 of them are core. So it's just an example of why we use core vocabulary. And then I'm going to be showing you the systems, because it's allowing the child to communicate with a variety of functions. So they're doing more than requesting. They can comment, they can protest, no, they can direct, do that. They can ask questions. What? What's that? How many of you have ever had the experience with a toddler going around, all around the room saying to you, what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? And you constantly answering what it is. But that's, you know, kids like to ask questions. They like to find information. You actually get things like play and where and go and want, and you actually get more bang for your buck. For example, if a child can say want to play or where go, it's going to be able to use the cross settings as opposed to maybe saying cat cookie, which is going to be very restrictive. It also, for any of you who do have systems, and if you've had to do a lot of programming, by having a language system set up, it can reduce the amount of program requiring as well and improve the functional use. So, just one of the other things I wanted to highlight, core vocabulary, you might think, oh, that's more abstract, you know, and when I show you some of the devices and the symbols, it's much easier to use just the pictures or just the photographs, which we will use as well, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But because it helps children learn more abstract language in context. For example, the more, like those of you using sign, I'm sure most of your children can produce the sign more. Now they learn that in context. They learned more. There was nothing here that specifically denoted that that meant more. And if you look at the symbol on some of the devices for more, it's more abstract. It's not a photograph. It's something, it's not, our kids with developing language aren't going to figure out that that symbol, that picture means more. But they learn it in context. Just like learning the sign more. They're learning that in context when they want more of a particular food or a toy or whatever it might be. And Snodgrass and Stoner did a study with a 9-year-old boy who had multiple disabilities, including deaf blindness and intellectual disability, and they actually taught tactile symbols for more, done, and new as an initial communication vocabulary. So all very abstract, but by teaching these words in context, they were able to teach those types of core words. So it doesn't always have to be the photographs and the pictures of the nouns, and although we do that as well. Okay, we talked about a lot of that. One of the things I just wanted to highlight about that is that we can teach it, as I said, across context, and that's a principle of what we're doing is we're teaching with a lot of repetition, but with variety. So you can have motivating activities. For example, here's an example of teaching the word go. You can teach it during a car activity, and you can teach maybe on during that activity. But then, now I have also in there big and play and want different and not. But then you can go to another activity for maybe cooking. And you can use those same words, go before mixing, or when you begin to eat, or putting things on the table. So it's all the same words, but in a different activity. And that's how we learn language, so that it's not just bound to that context, but these are words that we can use in different contexts. One of the things we stress as well in teaching aided communication with systems is that we can use it as well in lots and lots of modeling of using the communication system throughout the day. For those of you who are using sign, I'm sure you all sign within the home. You all took sign language classes, didn't you? So you could do as much sign as possible. Am I correct? Or you try? No? Yeah. And what we found is that actually the typically developing child will have exposed to oral language for approximately 4,380 hours by the time they're 18 months of age. So if someone's using a different symbol set, whether it's sign or whether it's pictures on an iPad, if they're only being exposed to it, say, during speech therapy, 20 or 30 minutes each week, twice a week, it'll take 84 years to have the same experience with symbols as typically developing children do with oral language. So it's just something to think about when you're teaching communication systems. I wanted to briefly touch as well on a program that we had over at the University of Central Florida with children with Down syndrome. This was the summer before, no, it was actually last summer. And we had workshops and individual sessions for a number of children between the ages of 3 and 5. And what we found, you can look at that graph there, we took a 10-minute video with the parent and child before the intervention, and then we had a 6-week block of intervention with both the workshop as well as individual sessions. And that light green shows the, after participation, the number of communication turns. Now, we looked at all modalities. We weren't highlighting just using the aided communication. But what we found is that children became much more communicative because they had a functional means of communication and using the aided AAC, and by providing, as I say, you're getting the voice output, they're seeing the visual symbols as it's speaking aloud. It actually helped them learn a lot of vocabulary and become much more, initiate a lot more and be much more involved in the whole communication process, so that we saw that their communication turns in all modalities, speech, sign, and using the iPad, increased significantly. Now, I'm just going to show a video of one of the young children that participated in our program last summer. And the point that I wanted to highlight with this is the fun. That communication should be fun. We should, when we introduce assistive technology, it's not about necessarily sitting at a table and doing our work. Let's have fun with language. And here's a mom and her little boy at home, and they're just playing a game and having fun while he's learning language. And okay, he's putting 2 words together, but you could easily do the same thing with just a single word. Oh, no sound? Let me pause it. Yeah, that'll work.
I don't know if you can hear it. I don't have sound into the thing.
You can't hear it.
No. Not loud enough. Sorry. All right.
Well, I'll narrate. That's okay. It's a very short clip. And he's using his iPad and his sign. He's initially says "want help" when she's throwing them over, and then he says "want play" as they throw them back. And this was just a little game that he and his mom were engaged in, but so, and as I said, the point I want to make is just, it should be throughout the day. Play, fun, because that's children are motivated to communicate about. And that's the way language develops in all, across contexts. Okay, now to get into the meat of it. iPads and tablets for communication. Why would you think of an iPad? Well, this, as I said, there are new possibilities. It's so wonderful to see mainstream technology have all this specialized programs for children with disabilities. It's so much less expensive. The availability, it's so, sometimes you don't even have to buy an additional device. I had a child who came in for an assessment a couple of weeks ago, and they had an iPad, an old iPad laying around at home. They said, oh, we can just put the app on that. You don't necessarily need the latest and the greatest iPad Air. You can use, an iPad 2 or, one of the earlier ones. We actually had a bunch of iPad 1s donated to us that we refurbished, and we were able to provide for free for children who didn't have access to any kind of device. So there's a lot more availability. Not everybody has insurance to cover the cost of a dedicated communication aid. Plus, they're very mainstream. Everybody has them. They're cool. There's a wide range of apps that can be used. The only thing you have to be careful of using an iPad for communication is that if you're using it for other things as well, that the child might decide that they want to watch the YouTube videos or they want to watch the games instead of necessarily using the iPad for communication. And you also want to be able to maybe talk about those YouTube videos or whatever game that you're playing as well. So I have some families who they have a dedicated iPad for communication and they call it the talk pad. That's the way they handle it. And it might have a different kind of case, a different color, etc. And the portability, they're just, it's great. I suppose the disadvantages, but these are reducing over time. They don't have as much support and quality control as your dedicated AAC devices. But what we're finding is that the companies are responding to the need. And some of the companies that make the dedicated devices and also make apps are now starting to provide an increased amount of support for the apps. A couple of the larger app developers like Proloquo Go, which I think somebody here is using, Touch Chat, Silverkite or Saltillo, who produces Touch Chat, they have some really nice resources online, and they have lots and lots of webinars, video tutorials. There's lots of support. So I'm going to show you that in a little while. iPads mightn't be quite as durable as some of the other devices, but there's some good cases out there, so I think we can get around that. The key is we usually have to add an external speaker, a Bluetooth speaker, in order for the volume to be loud enough for a classroom or outside or a room like this. I talked about the multifunctional use and lack of funding. Although you're from different states, your state might fund an iPad for communication. Florida does not, but some states actually are, so that's a good thing. And when we're looking at apps, there are hundreds of apps out there. There are so many apps, even specifically for AAC. But we really need to think about what's going to be the best app for my child starting with communication, at their stage of communication. There are a lot of apps that were developed for parents, maybe for their particular child, and they maybe necessarily haven't kept up with the different iOS developments and things. You might download an app and then all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. But we need to consider things like language development, access. Sometimes some of the more sophisticated apps have things where, you know, for example, you can adjust the screen. So if a child tends to go like this a lot, you can make it so it only responds to the first hit. Or maybe someone doesn't have the right motor control where they drag their hand across it. You can make it so it, when you lift your finger up on the one you're on, it works. There's all different things like that. So we need to consider that as well. And then we want to look at the growth potential. Is this something that's going to grow with my child over time? So we want to look at it. Is it an app where my child has the potential to start to learn to create their own language, maybe put a couple of words together if possible? Or is it just going to allow for pre-stored scripts? What kind of symbols? Are they symbols that maybe my child will be able to discriminate, considering their visual skills, their cognitive skills, all that? What kind of voices are there? Some of the apps that are there have very robotic voices. Some have really nice, childlike sounding voices. And then the access. And then it's really important to look at the support that's available, because some have very good support. As I said, they have the whole websites, and I'll show you, and their parent Facebook pages, blogs. There's some really nice support out there with some of the apps now. It's getting better and better. There's the iPad and the iPad mini. And there's also the Pro Slate, which is the top one, which turns it into a dedicated device, which will be funded by Medicare. AbleNet also does some cases and setups that will also be funded by some insurance companies and possibly Medicaid. And then there's the dedicated tablet devices. Somebody said they have an Accent. I have one here. Say they're looking more and more like iPads now. So if someone does have insurance funding or Medicaid, that's also a possibility beyond. These are all dedicated devices that are funded by insurance, and they look not terribly different than iPads, but the cost is very different. You know, you could be talking from $500 to $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. So it makes a difference. An iPad, you pay about $400 for an iPad. For one of the most robust apps, the most you would pay would be probably about $300, and then maybe a good case and a Bluetooth speaker. So you could be set up for around $800. But it's the apps, they keep coming. Some of you have mentioned Proloquo Go. Another good one is TouchChat HD or TouchChat HD with word power. Sonaflex, GoTalk Now. I'm going to unplug this and plug in an iPad and show you a bunch of these now in a couple minutes. Speak for Yourself, My Talk Tools. A lot of them have online programming, like My Talk Tools has a workspace that you can do all programming on your computer, and then you can just download it separately onto your device. Things like Proloquo Go, you can send your pages and TouchChat up to a cloud-based, either Dropbox or a cloud-based system. So if you have a number of iPads in the house and you want to download it to your one or as a backup because your child's iPad may have been dropped in water, you have whatever you've done. You're not going to lose all your programming. So it's great to have all that. So there's a whole range of different apps there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug this and I'm going to show you them. But before I unplug it, I just want to show you some of the web resources as well. The first one I'm going to go to is the aactechconnect.com, because this is a good, this is a good resource. Oh, I think we've lost the internet. Okay.
So which one is it? This one?
No, I'm going to go this. I'm actually going to go to this one. This one called Aac Tech Connect. If you go into the Aac Apps Assistant, what you're going to see, and that's where I am now, the Aac Apps Assistant, and then where it says here, click here to find out more. What they have here is a document. There's two things you can do. There's one that's a paid thing that you can do. See the way they have they have the different apps, and then under each column, is that showing up on there? Yeah. Yeah, you see over here? And under each column, they have the features of the app, so you can compare them side by side. Now, there is a preview for free, so you can always try it out for a month. And then another thing that they have is, if you look down, you scroll down, there's what they call popular Aac apps summary based on categories. And I'm going to open this up. And this is a really, really useful document to peruse if you're looking to try to decide what kind of app you might want to trial with your child. So I'm going to open it up. And what they do is they break it up into different types of apps. There's what they call robust apps that have a wide range of vocabulary, different layout options. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're more comprehensive. And they give the prices as well. And then they have the more features apps, which are ones that are kind of mid-range. And then they have kind of basic ones as well. And they give the price and kind of some starter ones too. So the starter ones are limited in terms of what they'll do if you're looking long-term, but they, might be something to trial. But the problem with some of the starter ones, you don't necessarily have the manipulation to make pictures bigger, to add in photographs, to this customization that might not be available for some of these starter ones. But it's a good document. I'm not going to go through every app on the document, but it's actually a really nice resource for you to review on the Aac Tech Connect website. Another good website just for apps, for learning using an iPad, and some early learning apps is this, as well as they also have an iPad's AAC section, is this Spectronics. It's actually an Australian one, but they are really good in terms of, you can see, you can scroll through, and there's lots of different apps that you can look at for early learning, and then you can also look in terms of AAC. So that's actually a very nice website. And there was another one. Yeah, Inclusive TLC is another company, and they actually have some really nice, just basic early learning. Well, they have a whole range, but say they have some quite inexpensive early learning apps to even just get a child used to using a screen. You know, they maybe an iPad is, they're young, they're very little, and you would just want to get them used to using a screen, understanding when you touch the screen something happens, and some early learning stuff as well. And a lot of them are only like $2.99. They're not very expensive. So they're nice. There's a whole range of them. So that's just another resource that I wanted to show you. Okay. And now, what I want to do next is I want to go into the iPad and show you some of the apps. And in addition to that, I'm going to just show you some technical tips as well. But I have to actually get out of this presentation in order to do it, because I have to plug in the iPad. Is anybody using an iPad for communication at all? Oh, yeah, well, you said Proloquo to Go. Do you use it frequently? Yeah.
Well, we use it for very basic things, like want to go to bed, pool, indicating basic wants.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah.
I think the hardest thing for us is she tends to slap and not point, so she needs a little hand of her hand to point. Otherwise, she just slaps it with it.
Yeah. And which app are you using?
We have my first aid.
Okay. I don't think that has the screen controls, though, does it? Because they're quite small on my first AEC, aren't they? But
You can use, I think you can use 2 icons or 8.
yeah, you can use 2. But you can't really, can you adjust the hold down time on the screen for that one? I don't think you can, yeah.
Lock it, it's like,
Yeah, yeah,
but then you can't change it.
yeah. And I think that one doesn't allow you to put photographs in either, does it? Yeah. Okay. The first one I'm going to show you is called Go Talk Now. And it's a really nice early one, and there's a free version that you can actually, if you want to try it, you can make 3 pages yourself. So, I have to find my Aac Apps. So, now we're going to have the same problem with sound, I'm afraid. But let me try to hold this as close to it as possible. Okay. Now, this is called Go Talk Now. And as I mentioned, you can download a free version where you can literally make 3 pages to try it out, to see if it works for you. And it's actually full-featured for those 3 pages. It has a lot of extra features to make access a little bit easier, but it's something that you can go from a simple grid of 2 icons, it goes up to about 24. It's really nice because you can integrate photographs, you can integrate music, you can integrate video clips, different things that might be motivating for your child. So this is just a very basic setup that I've made up. So I've got a greeting.
Hi, I'm Jenny.
And then I have I want set up so that when the child says I want, it goes into a page of things that she might want.
I want.
Now, this is just an example of a page with smaller buttons, but you can customize between pages. But what I did is, that's a 9-page location, but it doesn't mean we necessarily have to have 9 different buttons on there. I just spread it out. So it's just an example of, by putting spaces and things like that, it might make it a little bit easier to make those miss-hits. So these are the things that she might say she wants. So maybe if she says a snack.
A snack.
And you could have that actually go into a page of snacks as well. And you could customize that. You could take photographs of all the different foods that she likes, whatever is suitable for her. Okay? Then I have it set to automatically go back to that top page, but you don't necessarily have to have it go that way.
Want.
So we might have to play,
To play.
and then you could have that go into a choice of her favorite toys. Say we wanted to make a page. I'm just going to show you basically how simple it is to do that. So say I wanted to make a page to play. We go into our page editor. We would add a page, and you have your choices of lots of different ones, and there's a 4-button page. So maybe I wanted to add one of her toys, so maybe she wants to play with her doll. Okay, there we've got doll. We can add a picture. Now you can actually search for images online or any pictures that you might have on your iPad. Because I'm not online here, I won't have access to that, but maybe, that was a picture of her doll. You could do that. And then the action is text-to-speech. We can make it say doll.
Doll.
And then what I might do after that is I might have it go automatically back to the top page. And then what I'll do here is on my play page, now I'll set that up to, after the action, it's actually going to go to the new page that I just made, which I think was that one. I forgot to name it. So now,
I want. To play.
And there's our new page. And you can literally take photographs with your iPad, different things like that. So I have 4 buttons on there, but maybe I want only 2 choices because we're starting out. So I can just have two buttons showing there. I can have whatever way I like it. Or, let me go to programming.
Jenny. Hi.
Sorry.
Hi.
It's a little tricky to, there we go. When I go into, you can easily take that same page. If I'm expanding it, I can go up to 9. And if I wanted to then add things on there, and you could go all the way up to 24. As I mentioned before, if you want to move things around, you can, to make space, I can swap them to make spaces between them. So that maybe I might start, that's another way we might do child can handle that size button, and then that way they learn maybe hi is always here, I want is always that, her name is always there. So we're not changing where both buttons are located as we gradually add new vocabulary. And what we're doing there is we're following principles of motor automaticity. Kind of like when you type on a keyboard, do you look at, maybe some of you do, but do you look at every key that you press? You probably don't, but when you learned, you did. But then you kind of learned where the different keys were, similar to that. I always start with the smallest size that the child can handle, but small doesn't necessarily always work, because then I can have extra buttons and then gradually add them in, and they don't have to relearn where buttons are located. It's just a little trick with teaching and expanding use of communication pages. So just an example, and we'll go through this one as well. We have people, and there's a people page.
Mom.
I
want.
The other thing I want to show with this one is, okay, you have watch television, you can have a page there, but you can have a music page as well. Sometimes we find with some children, we need to have really motivating things to help them learn to use the system. And things like music and videos and food often are very motivating. So those are often the things that we might focus on initially. As I think some of you mentioned, you're using it primarily with food and primarily for requesting in order for things to be motivating. So this app is nice, actually, because if I select music, I've created a music page, and now if I select this, you can have your music media file in there. And you can do that with videos as well. So it's useful in terms of, I find sometimes for someone who's at a very early stage and we really just need to give them the idea of that you're touching the iPad to request something very simple or something very motivating, that can actually be motivating. It's also a way for someone to, a child maybe to keep themselves occupied as well. They have access to choices of different music or videos. What I do often for videos as well, because that's actually playing the whole thing. So what I usually do is make my own clips so they don't go on and on. So for video, I could just take pop up a YouTube video on my computer, take a little short video clip with my iPad, maybe of just a minute of a song or a short whatever, and then I just download it as a file within this app so that the child then can select their own video. So this is, as I say, it's a very nice early communication app. If you buy the full app, it's I think $79.99, but if you want to try it, you can try the free version with access to 3 pages. And I believe those 3 pages have full functionality. The other thing is you were talking about slapping, how your child is doing a lot of slapping. I believe this one they also have some features in the settings so that in terms of the button activation, okay, well, you can have touch up or touch down. Yeah, and you can have, there's what's called the debounce setting. So if I set it at 2 seconds, I believe, for this one. Now, let's see if it's going to work for me.
I'm Jenny.
But it's only going to select it once. It's not going to select it more than once. And a lot of the better full-featured apps actually have that. As I say, it's a nice one, and there are also a number of pages available through the network that you can get online that are already made as well. So that's the Go Talk Now. The next one that I'm going to show you is Touch Chat HD. And do any of you know this app? Yeah. Okay, a few you do. All right. This is another nice one. Now, I have this set up at a basic page, a very early page, and it's set up with that predictability. But you're going to see, a lot of common features. So here we have, I want to eat, and then there's your choices, different choices for eating. And then home goes to your home button. I want
to play with cars.
And then there's a page for cars.
Crash. Beep beep.
There's a social page.
Hello.
So, and you can customize this. That's a very basic setup, and it's also, again, a nice one for starting. This one, too, you can also do that with the settings. You can set them up so that, again, you have a hold down time, or I'm just going to show you now. So we can actually put a dwell time. So sometimes for some children that do a lot of this tapping like this, we actually, and they learn the motor plan where they just have to hold it a little bit longer, just that tiny bit longer. The other one doesn't quite do that, so that it just, this won't work, but just, you can set the time that you have it set up.
I want to drink
And you could have it go up to create a sentence or not. That's kind of a basic setup on TouchChat. I'm going to show you some other setups as well. This is what's called multi-chat, this user, and it looks very complicated after the last ones, but I'm going to show you how you can simplify that as well. But it's nice, it has a lot of potential. You have,
I want
okay, so similar, it might be.
to watch cartoons.
Oop.
I want to watch cartoons.
Okay, and what we see is there is that potential that the messages can go into this message window so that the children get the idea of how words go together to create language. What you can do, though, sometimes when you start with this, it's, oh my goodness, it's very complicated. And so what you can do if you want to use this is you can actually simplify it a bit by hiding buttons. So sometimes I do this when I'm teaching. I go into hide mode, and a lot of the good apps do that. And so I might only, maybe initially, I'm only going to even leave that there. So then, and I might leave more to eat, to play. You know, I might just have a few things there. And maybe I'm just going to reveal just a couple of things initially. So,
I want more.
so it makes it quite simple. But by having that automatic navigation like that, you don't have to have so many buttons on a page, but the child's getting the idea that you can combine symbols to create language. That's what I was talking about before, learning language and learning even at a simple level. And this is a strategy that I would use with a lot of the different apps. Okay, I want to go back to this for a second. One of the other things I wanted to show on this app is the core words. I forgot I have a hold down time on it. This gives the opportunity, again with this, I would usually hide a bunch of buttons when I'm teaching this. Whoops. Sorry, I have the hold down time on it, it's not. So when I talked about teaching those words, teaching those core words so that children start to learn language and learn, again, you can take something like this quite and quite simply want that. So that, the child starts to learn words that can be used in different situations, learns to use those core words. And playing a game with cars, go, or that go. Again, and you can be modeling, as we talked about. You're modeling the same as you might model sign or verbal language, as when we teach AAC, we speak AAC as well. So it's just an example of how something that maybe looks like it can be a lot more complicated, we can reduce the level down to a very simple level to teach language. Another thing I want to show you are visual scene displays. Okay, so some of the apps have what they call visual scene displays, TouchChat does, and you can do one of two ways. You can have a photograph in the middle and you could have lots of messages around it, or you could have something where the photograph takes up the whole page. Maybe you might have a family photo, and when they touch mom, it says mom, and dad, it says dad, and brother, it has the brother's name. So that, and for some children that maybe a grid doesn't work for them, it doesn't kind of fit, it makes it a little bit simpler and easier. I'm going to actually go back to the Go Talk Now for a second because I had a nice visual scene on there that I wanted to show you. So this is a visual scene I made of a child's room, and so over on the chair, it says sit with me when she says that. Over at the table, let's have a tea party. Over by the bookshelf,
Let's read a book.
So for some children, having the ability to use those visual scenes, those pictures, can be much more meaningful for them and can aid in the learning. Okay, one of the other apps I want to show you, just talking again about photographs and making things really easy for someone at a very early level, is you can have just a literally talking photo album. This app, I think, is just a couple of dollars.
My name is Katie, and this is my family.
Okay, so you can literally have a talking photo album. So
This is my brother Sam. He's a munchkin.
where's the speaker?
These are my sisters Lucy and Molly. They help each other out a lot. This is my dad John. He's really silly.
But again, it's a nice way for a child who maybe isn't quite used to the screen and the iPad, that you can actually get them used to just using it and touching it, and that when they touch a picture, it's going to talk.
This is my mom Lauren. She is super duper nice.
So it's another resource, and particularly for those children who are very young, where you want to get them to get used to it. Okay. Yeah, we're running out of time here. The last one that I'm going to show you for today is Proloquo to Go. This is a basic Proloquo setup. Again, it does similar things to the others.
I want more. I want more. I want to go outside. I want to go outside.
With this also,
All done.
you can also set it up and hide buttons as well. So again, for learning, if we want to hide a button, say I wanted to hide this one for now, I'd select that, I go to visibility, and I'd make it hidden, and then I'm done. And I could do that for a number of buttons. Again, if you're just teaching and you want to start very simple, you can hide buttons. You can adjust for all these apps. You can change the color of the buttons. You can change the border. This also has all those features that I showed on the other one in terms of holding down your hand, avoiding that repetitive tapping, all that as well. This one does not have visual scene displays, and it does not predict grammar as much as TouchChat does. TouchChat has a facility, say, if you make a sentence like maybe I am, that it'll automatically make your verb say, you know, playing, the ing on the end, whereas this won't actually do that. This you have to think about, oh, I need to put a word ending on, and it's more complicated. Okay. I'm going to also show you just another, when I was talking about some of the early learning apps before, RJ Cooper also has some. It's another company. And this is just a little cause-effect type of program that, again, someone can understand when they touch a screen, something happens. So when the child touches the screen, it's just going to play some music, and then it'll stop after a designated period of time. Anyway, you get the idea. Again, it's an easy, for someone who's new to an iPad screen and you just want to teach them that when you touch a screen, it does something. So it's good for that stage. There's another app, actually, I just wanted to mention for you because there is a free version, and it's called Sounding Board from AbleNet. So you can have something, they have some pre-made grids.
Yes.
With just recorded speech, but you can expand upon these as well. You can make your own boards, and there's a number of preload boards that you can make as well. Let's see if we go to social.
What is your name?
So, but it's a free one that's available as well. It's not as full-featured as some of the other ones that I showed you. Okay. I think that's a start anyway.